Greetings, how you doing? This is Kinesiology 234. This is a presentation on business models within the fitness industry. And at this point, you can really spend a lot of time digging into like the minutia, if you will, the fine grains of different business models within the industry. This presentation, I'm just trying to keep it simple and give a broad overview of the ones that students may be confronted with or come across while they're in the search for their first job and getting into the workforce. So you can kind of break these out into main categories, right? So you'll have a big box where it's maybe 100,000 square feet or so, perhaps maybe a little bit less, usually in a storefront. Sometimes they're self-contained. You'll also have non-for-profits like the YMCA, which those are huge facilities, much like a big box, but they're classified as non-for-profits. Public, much like a park district, Barrington, Arlington Heights, Palatine, Oak Grove Village, they all have their own park district system. Within the park district itself are different job opportunities. And many times you'll have companies that'll have a business model where they don't own the facility, they don't own the equipment, they just provide the services and they manage the facilities. Franchise owners, they buy the right to own a facility, and the processes and all the behind the scenes work is part of the franchise agreement. Also, the other part of it is you're paying for the brand. That's part of owning a franchise. And then you have independent business owners, people who own facilities. Usually these facilities are a little bit smaller in size, more like a storefront. Sometimes they're like in industrial parks, and they're just an independent owner who usually has said, the heck with it, I'm done working in a big box facility, I'm gonna open my own place. And then you have other specialty facilities like mixed martial arts, CrossFit, etc., gymnastics, baseball facilities, things where they really specialize in a special type of training. So if we look a little deeper into this, you have big box facilities, and you know this from having been in these facilities and probably worked out in many of these, but they offer a number of different amenities and programs. Everything from kids club all the way through to having a floor full of cardio equipment. They might have basketball, a couple swimming pools, personal training, group exercise classes, etc. Examples of this would be like a LA Fitness, Export, Lifetime, Planet Fitness, or even like Midtown Athletic Clubs here in the Chicago area, and then some other areas around the country. And these have evolved over time, right? For the longest time here in the Chicago area, it was Bally Total Fitness, and then you had maybe one or two high-end clubs like a Midtown Athletic Club, and there was nothing in between. And then Lifetime decided, hey, you know what? We can create a model that's also a premium player model, and we'll go ahead and offer that. And they've done a good job of stamping out those facilities, and they've done a good job of leveraging what there's actually two brothers who are the ones that actually started it. They've done a good job of leveraging what they had in their background or experiences to be able to develop these businesses into basically a very well-known and successful brand. Export, that individual started off, I'm not even sure if it was like out in St. Charles or so, I can't remember what it was, but it was somewhere in the Chicagoland area. And this individual had a little fitness area in the basement of his house, and he let his friends come in and work out whenever they wanted. He gave them the key to the place. And that's how Export started off, and also how Export ended up being a 24-hour facility, because when he started the facility, he said, what the heck, if I'm gonna have 24 hours with my friends and family at my own house, I can have 24 hours in my business. And that's how Export kind of rolled in to the equation. Planet Fitness is another one where they've come on, and they're a big box player. They clearly have their own brand identity in terms of they have their logo meter or whatever that buzzer is, where you can't grunt or drop weights in the place. And then you have something like an LA Fitness, which LA Fitness bought a number of the Bally Total Fitness locations. So you can even look at this and go, Lifetime builds their own facilities. Lifetime bought out a brand and converted it to their own, and they kept the footprint of many of the facilities that they had. Export, for the longest time, Export liked to go into what were old movie theaters that were closed, and they liked to go into there because of the high ceilings and having the ability to put in climbing walls and basketball courts. Planet Fitness, usually storefront and Midtown Athletic Clubs, they have their own facilities in their own physical locations. With the YMCAs, as I mentioned, those are big facilities. We have one right over here in Palatine. That's Bueller YMCA. If you want to link out to it, you can link out here. But this is YMCA of Chicago, and you'll see a ton of different jobs, when you look at this. And they try to integrate themselves and embed themselves into the neighborhood and they offer a number of different programming. It's usually pretty darn kid friendly, right? They'll have like summer camps for kids. You can drop them off, and they'll do a full day of activities, and then the parents can come pick them up after work. And they do that as a way to offer a service to parents when the kids are out of school. There's also tons of after school kids programming as well, and it's a good model. It provides a great service. They've been around for over 100 years, I think it is. And when you look at like a YMCA, that's one because they're so big, and also like the big box facilities. If you play things right and play your cards right, you can move around and up in those facilities. With Park District, I placed links over here to all the different ones in the area. You look at this population of individuals because they are, quite frankly, part of the community. Most people who live in the community are offered a discount if they go and work out there. And they'll have many different programs and many different offerings, everything from like cello lessons to karate to maybe guitar to the Park District will also oversee operations for youth football or youth basketball or even just house league baseball. And these guys, as a result, they will tend to draw a clientele that's a little bit more on the economical side. They'll look for clients and members who are looking to actually save a couple bucks will go to these type of facilities because they're very cheap, they're very economical, and usually the facilities are quite nice. They're subsidized by the local municipality, and as a result, they have some money to utilize. Now, usually these facilities cry poor, and as a result, when you go into work for them, it's not a big money maker in terms of training. You can still get in and make some money personal training, but it's not going to be the higher amounts you'll see in some of the other privately owned big box facilities. But it's definitely a different culture, I'll put it that way. Now with managed facilities, here are a couple of them to the right. And for a number of years, let me use this as an example. You had Good Shepherd was a facility, still is a facility in Barrington on Route 59 or Barrington Road. I think at that point they're both still one and the same. I can't remember if it's split there or not. But that facility was Good Shepherd, and then Good Shepherd became part of Advocate Aurora. That facility was operated or managed by Midtown Health for a short bit. Midtown Health had to actually sell their portfolio of businesses that they managed because of COVID and they needed cash flow. And they ended up selling them to Health Fitness, which is located up in Lincolnshire off of Route 60. So my point to you is this: these are facilities that are smaller. They're usually kind of boutique-y, and they're offered as a value add for people who work for a company. So for example, when Midtown owned Good Shepherd, they also owned the facility that is at CDW, Computer Discount Warehouse. That's up in Vernon Hills. I had to think about it. One North Wacker's another one downtown. Citadel is another one that's downtown. You have another fitness facility that is also out in the burbs. That's at Kraft. And there's a couple of others. I mean, there's actually, I think there's almost close to, in the Chicago area alone, like 100 of them, if I remember correctly. But they're owned by any one of these. Plus One is another company. Exos is a company that's based out of Phoenix, Arizona. And they started off as a business that basically developed programming and had a facility where people who were pre-draft candidates would go and train before they would go into the football draft or baseball draft to increase their chances of being drafted higher, because they would go and do like the combine you saw maybe this past week on TV. And so they would do the combine, score higher because they went to Exos, and they'd end up making more money. God bless. But Exos, that's how they started off their business model. I want to say it was like Mark Verstegen started that. God, now about maybe 30 years ago. And it's developed into its own little business entity where now they have a couple different locations and they manage facilities around the country. They also have some other corporate training as well. But it's a different environment, different animal. I can't stress this enough when you get into these facilities, while Exos or Plus One or Health Fitness might be managing the day-to-day operations, it's very much like Centers. Centers manages the day-to-day operations in the M building at Harper College, but they don't own it. And so Centers has this kind of like co-branded, if you will, position where they're subordinate to Harper because Harper takes precedent in the facility. It's really what they're promoting, and what they're promoting is the services offered by Harper. but it's done by centers, right? So it's kind of a quirky situation where one owns a facility, but somebody else is actually managing it. With franchises, they're kind of unique in terms of there's different franchises for different business models, and the franchises themselves. What you have is this relationship where you pay a royalty and you pay a fee up front to be able to use the licensing and the branding and be able to use the marketing materials associated with their particular brand. Curves was a huge one several years ago. Now you have Anytime Fitness is one that's local. It's right down the street from us. And it's a good example of how you have this brand and it can be exclusive where it is that person's or the company's brand, or like in the example of the Anytime Fitness in Palatine, that gentleman owns like 7 or 8 of them in the Chicagoland area, and he has his own little thumbprint on that actual brand itself. So make no mistake about it, when you go in to interview or meet with individuals, you might end up meeting with the owner, and he'll be able to have some flexibility in the business itself and be able to offer you different promotions or opportunities in terms of personal training. Now I brought in Crunch here. Crunch could have went earlier in the big box facilities because with Crunch, you have several of them in the Chicagoland area that are actually franchised. They're not corporate owned, and they're franchised out of by a company. I want to say it's either in Indiana or Georgia. They own and operate numerous Crunch facilities in the area. So again, when you go into these facilities, you have some flexibility, but with something like a Crunch, you probably would be very, very hard pressed to be able to do any kind of negotiating with them in terms of personal training and being able to negotiate rates or anything like that. So with independent business owners, these are becoming more and more rare. Usually it's a martial arts studio in a storefront. One of the best ones in the area is Flow MMA. This is the individual I've talked about several times where he and I are friends, and he's been around for 16 years, so he's clearly doing something right. And when you look at these fitness facilities, they're very, very unique. And that's very much an extension of the owner. When you go into Flow, it's Ash's place. When you go into Barracks, the guy who owns it, he was a formerly in the military. You know it when you walk in there. And Barracks is very much like a bodybuilding type of gym. CrossFit, they have their own different little culture when you walk in. And the other specialty facilities are the same way. You walk into a small fitness studio, no bigger than the size of a classroom. And the challenge you have is when you go in, some of these people will negotiate. Some of these people are okay with taking a $20 drop-in fee for the session, while others, there's one in Palatine on Northwest Highway, where they charge $80 and they split it 50-50. So they take $40 out of your session. So you have to ask the right questions when you meet with these different people to know what you're getting into. And there will be a different presentation here in a little bit that you can look at where it goes into some of the business models that are utilized in different ways that a personal trainer fits into the different business models. So you have to look at this and go, okay, with these independent facilities, you really have to do your research and dig in terms of who's there, how they run it. Make sure you understand the nuances of the person that's there, because if you don't get along with that person, oh my goodness, you're in for a very long career working with individuals there. And then you have to be able to ask the right questions, right? Because that person's influence will have an influence on the culture, as I mentioned before, in terms of like Ash's place versus a CrossFit studio or Barracks. And then the other side of it is when you look at this, you have to ask the key questions in terms of how many members they have, how many people they have. Can you pick up more clients while you're there, or are you just beholden to the ones that you're bringing in? And if you're bringing them in, why not negotiate a better rate for you, because you're basically just putting money in that owner's pocket. So you kind of look at this in terms of how you're trying to fit into somebody else's business. Again, I've said it a ton of times. You're the Big Mac and the McDonald's. You're kind of co-branding yourself into a fitness facility, whether it's big box or a small entity. So as a result, you really have to kind of evaluate your position, but also to get a full understanding of what your position is, you have to ask the right questions of the person across the table from you when you're going in for an interview for a job with one of those facilities or looking to take your clients to one of those facilities. All right, guys, signing off. Thanks.